Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Rap Thought Podcast, where Matthew and I, Brandon, kind of take an album, break it down. We listen to it a few times here and there and break it down, and we give you our rap thoughts and what we think about it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to do albums that we haven't heard before, either of I or one of us hasn't heard, or it's a brand new album that comes out recently, and then we listen to it and give our initial thoughts on it. And I think another thing that's cool about this podcast is that for the most part, these albums come out of a hat. And it's not like we sit around and plan out what albums we're going to do. It's, we throw a bunch of albums into a hat, we pick one out, and that's what we're going to do for the next episode. Which is a fun thing to do. It makes it random and interesting.
Yeah, it's not this ongoing list of our favorite albums that we're just touching on to share. Right. So it's
because that's kind of boring. We could do our favorite albums and we'll just only have great things to say about it, and then that's it. Instead of we throw names into the hat of albums, of artists that we don't even like or we don't really know about, and then all of a sudden we get a different perspective.
I mean, when you say that, it makes me think of DaBaby, because we recently did his album, and it's like, I don't want to say I don't like him, but it's not an artist I'm going to follow. But I'm glad that we do. Yeah. I'm glad we do it the way we do. I'm glad we did that episode, because we need to, it takes you out of your element in your zone. Mm-hmm. It's like checking someone else out. They all can't be Kendricks and blues and stuff like that.
Right.
So.
Yeah, 100%. And I think with this week's episode, that falls into the same category.
Oh, we're jumping the gun. Does it fall into that category, Matthew? We haven't even talked about it yet. Jesus.
For me.
Slow down.
So before we let you guys know what album we're doing, if you haven't looked at the title of this episode, we want to thank all of our listeners on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Stitcher. Definitely follow us on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Hit us up on there. And yeah, we thank all you guys for your support.
Yeah, thanks a bunch. So yeah, this week we're doing Man on the Moon, The End of Day by Kid Cudi. So before we get in, a little background on him. He's born Scott Ramon Seguro Mescudi. Damn,
that was a good accent.
Yeah.
I like
Dude,
that.
I took 4 years Spanish. It may have been Spanish 1 I had to do twice, but that's still 4 years.
You need to speak more Spanish around here.
Dude, you should. If you want to become fluent, we can do a pod in Spanish. Let me know. But the homie's born January 30th, 1984 from Cleveland, Ohio. There's just not too many artists from that area.
There's not. The only one that really comes to mind for me is Charles Hamilton, but he was only born in Cleveland. He didn't really rep Cleveland. He moved to Brooklyn, I think in middle school or high school. Mm-hmm. But yeah, not the same as someone who grew up in Cleveland and came out of Cleveland as an artist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a couple things I want to touch on, because I feel like, as Matt kind of hints out, there are things about this album that are kind of cool, that I want to get off my chest. For the first part, I like that I was watching a couple of interviews that he was in, and I like that he is doing his best to be different and to kind of not stray away, but just to do something a lot different. Mm-hmm. So people saying like, yo, this isn't really hip hop. What is this? And it's like, yo, don't worry about it. Like, I want to be different. I don't want it to be one theme. And this album, one of the biggest themes you're going to see is him talking about mental health issues, loneliness, depression, anxiety, drug use. And I have to say, it's kind of unique in its way that no other artist really touches on that to the degree that Kid Cudi does. Mm-hmm. So with that said, like, it's cool that he brings a lot of attention to these issues, because especially for people that are in high school, younger folk, that's such a critical time that there's so many emotions and thoughts that people go through. Mm-hmm. And one of the things he had said was, one of his main points was he wants kids to not feel alone, and to stop committing suicide. And so just with that message, I thought was really cool.
Yeah. Me personally, I've never listened to a Kid Cudi album in its entirety before we did this episode. And of course I know Kid Cudi, and I've heard a lot of his songs that are on the radio, and I kind of dismissed him early on and didn't really give him a fair shot. But I can recognize the genius that he has for making music. Mm-hmm. Going back to before this album came out, him writing for Kanye on 808s and Heartbreaks. He has an extreme talent level for music. So when you say he wants to do something different and he's not worried about this not being a hip hop album, that speaks to his genius of making the music that he wants to make and stepping outside of the box that hip hop can put you in. And I think that's why Kanye used him on 808s, because 808s wasn't necessarily a hip hop album.
So an odd album.
Yeah, and that's because of Kid Cudi. His influence on the music industry is, extremely apparent. He's influenced all the major artists. He's influenced Drake, Kanye, tons of other artists. We can go on and on about it, but yeah, and I think what I really liked about listening to this album this past week and a half or so, it brought back actually a lot of memories for me from college, because this album came out in 2009, and I remember a lot of these songs were played every time I went to a party, anytime I went to another friend's dorm room.
That Day and Night Crookers remix?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime I went to the cafeteria, a lot of Kid Cudi songs were playing. So it just brings me back to, 10 or plus years ago to that time. And I remember these songs, and I wasn't necessarily a huge fan of the songs. Like I didn't mind them, but I also wasn't checking for it. I wasn't looking up Kid Cudi. I was like, oh, that's a cool song. Mm-hmm. And it just kind of missed the mark for me.
It's an interesting point. Like, I feel like the songs that release on the radio, the one, we'll talk about it later, the sample from Lady Gaga's Poker Face, mm-hmm. and then the Day and Night, like they were good tracks, but they weren't enough for me to be like, oh man, let me go grab this guy's album. Like, I remember when I first heard Swimming Pools, for whatever reason, I was like, I'm buying this album. I don't know who this is, but I'm buying this album when it comes out. But Kid Cudi didn't quite do that for me, but I did enjoy his tracks on the road.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably because it's not super hip hop. It's something else. And he mixes a lot of genres, which is really cool. He mixes hip hop, R&B, alternative rock, electronic. He's just mixing a lot of different stuff in there, which is great. I love that. I love that he's experimenting, and he definitely has his own sound. Which is awesome. One thing I also want to mention is, in my opinion, Kid Cudi was part of the last great XXL freshman list. Are you familiar with the freshman list that they put out every year?
Yeah, I don't know who else was with him, but
I'll read you. Me personally, you're gonna laugh when you hear it, but me personally, I think this is the best freshman list. It's Wale, B.O.B., Charles Hamilton, Asher Roth, Corey Guns, Blue, Mickey Fax, Ace Hood, Currency, and Kid Cudi.
Like it gets Blues on there.
And, well, yeah, Blue, but I love Mickey Fax. He's super dope. Charles Hamilton's one of my favorite rappers. Back then when Charles Hamilton first came out, he was definitely up there for me for the most listened artists throughout college. I love Charles Hamilton. B.O.B.'s great. Wale's great. Asher Roth he's definitely underrated. I mean, obviously everyone knows that song College, but he has a lot of great songs outside of that.
Mm-hmm. Sleep in the Bread Aisle was an all right album.
Yeah, no, that was a cool album. I think the next one was good too, the next year, which was J. Cole, Pill, Nipsey Hussle, Freddie Gibbs, Big Sean, Wiz Khalifa, OJ, the Juice Man, J-Rock, Fashawn, and Adonis. I think those are 2 great years back to back, and then after that it kind of falls off. But I just wanted to mention that.
No, that's cool. I should probably take some more looks at that. Yeah, it's weird because some of those artists aren't really
Some
low
kind
profile.
of disappeared. You know, I don't really know where Ace Hood is or Corey Guns, but yeah, they were. Asher Roth is kind of. He just put out an album actually like a month ago. I like it a lot.
I feel like he went back underground after.
Yeah, he's definitely gone underground,
burnout.
but he's still putting out great material. But Mickey Fax, he kind of disappeared for a while. Then he put out an album, I think 2 years ago, produced by Knots. That's a great fucking album.
It's a cool album.
Yeah, he can spit. And then obviously Wale, he's probably the most popular artist out of that group besides Kid Cudi.
Oh yeah, he's rolling with Rick Ross.
Yeah.
And Maybach Music Group. So, but yeah. Should we jump in?
Let's get started. Let's jump into Kid Cudi's Dreams.
Let's just jump in. So, I don't know, man. It's the first track in my Dreams. I mean, this album's actually kind of, it all goes together as this concept. And it's really him as this troubled individual that finds solace really when he's either on, not so much when he's on drugs, but really when he's just in his own space, whether if he's in his zone or if he's in his dreams. And in this first track, when he's talking about being in his dreams, you get the sense that this is his safe space. This is his sanctuary. He can do anything. He can do everything. Everything is dope, as he says. And everything goes the way that he wants to. So it's a really cool spot that he refers to quite a bit throughout the album. And so you'll see this mix of him talking about a track, and then he doesn't mention it in the track, but when you're reading the name of the song, it'll say Nightmare. So you know that shit's about to go downhill.
Right.
And when he's in his dreams, which he does refer to in other songs, you know that that's a good space for him.
Yeah, it's a great track to start the album off to let you know what you're about to get into, and he's welcoming you into his dreams and into his space. You know, he wants you to see what he's dreaming about, and he wants you to be a part of it. And I 100% did not expect Common to start talking. I did not see that coming. I had no idea Common had anything to do with this album. And then when I heard that, I was like, oh shit, like my ears perked up a bit. I was like, okay.
There's Common.
Like, all right.
In Common, he cuts in, 4 times during the album, I think. Yeah. And each time, it's very clear, concise, straight to the point, and helps you segue into the next track and for the rest of the album. So, I mean, he drops some cool stuff here. You know, he talks about how our stories are predestined, predetermined, how it's more acceptable to follow than to lead, so people may never find themselves, and how being a leader is a threat, and that is a problem to be a leader.
Right.
You know, he opens a story up about a man on the moon that listened to his inner voices and believed in himself. So, you know, aside from his dreams, the whole man on the moon concept is about how all his life he felt like he was in one space and had vivid imagination. So he always just felt distanced and outcast from everybody else. So he's essentially this man on the moon that's doing his own thing.
Right.
And so then the end of day is him falling asleep and taking us on this journey. And so the album begins with him, you know, begins at night in this dream and doing that with Common narrating, kind of keeping us on track.
Yeah, letting us know kind of the overarching theme of the album. And I love concept albums. I think it's a great tool for an artist to use to really complete the picture that they're trying to paint through music. But it could also be a really bad thing if they attempt a concept and it doesn't work out or it doesn't quite make sense. That's almost worse than just making an album full of dope tracks,
which is not really done here.
Right.
So.
No, I think Kid Cudi does a great job. I'm just pointing it out.
No, I was just saying it's not full of dope tracks. Like right. It really is just like a concept, but we'll get into that as we go along.
I think Kid Cudi does a great job of really keeping the narrative there and in front of us and keeping the concept present.
I thought they bring up a good point though. Like, is it a threat to be a leader?
Yes, because you open yourself up to criticism and doubt and people fighting you on your leadership.
I'm gonna add on top of that, I think it's a threat to be a leader because if you have to go against the status quo of something and rise up and be like, I immediately thought of, I see something wrong. I'm going to have a voice about it and speak up against it. You know, as he also mentions that it's a problem to be one. It's a problem to be one because, as you're saying, you become a target and you're the focus. But you're also speaking up against like, hey, no, things are pretty good here. Like, I don't know why you feel the need to speak up and do something about it.
Yeah, but I think in terms of this album, he's not necessarily being a leader to other people. This album is really about himself, and he's looking inward for this whole album. So it's really about leading himself and being not following others to find himself. It's really just looking within and finding out who you are.
I can agree with that. I mean, I think it's also too like him being a leader based on actually, because he talks a lot about like people just kind of looking at him and being like, yeah, you.
Right.
And so just kind of standing up to that, like using that and standing up and leading with it. So I guess I'm not saying I don't agree with you. I guess I do agree. So
that's good.
But
the next track is Soundtrack to My Life, which is him. It's basically the real intro song. After we get through, the soft opening, we get into the intro, and he knows he's not the coolest guy yet, but he's sure of himself. He knows he's not quite where he wants to be, but he's also not trying to be like anyone else. He's not trying to do braggadocious rap. He opens up and he's vulnerable, but he knows that he's going to get through it, and he's going to come out being better than anyone else just by him being honest and genuine.
And it's cool because he goes a little deeper than that as well too, because he mentions how he came up poor, mom wondering how mom's putting presents under the tree. He mentions that he has he has 3 older siblings, 2 brothers and 1 sister. It sounds like sister kind of is another parent at times. And he also talks about how his dad passed away.
Yep.
And becoming paranoid and I don't know, trying to understand life and trying to figure things out. And the biggest thing he brings up too is that, he's growing up with the sadness that no one seems to really see, which is in the chorus. I've got some issues that nobody else can see.
Yeah.
And all these emotions pouring out of me.
Yeah, I think, he's trying to understand his place with his dad being passed away. I think that really affected him. So he's trying to figure out his place in life and with the people around him and at school and, all these different things. And he does it in a way that's very genuine, and it doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel kind of, like poor me, look at me. He's saying it so that you can connect with him. He's not saying it to get your sympathy. He's just letting you in, and so that you can have empathy with him. Not just feel sorry, but you're with him along this journey.
I agree. He's definitely not calling for attention. He does it in a way where it is like, hey, this is what's up. Like,
yeah.
And it also made me think about all the titles to the songs, to the tracks in the album. Like it all makes sense. So when you say the soundtrack to my life, I'm just telling you a story. Like this is what's up, and this is kind of my everyday thing. Yeah. And he also delves into you get the idea that he's dealing with depression and anxiety. And I don't know, there's a part where he thinks of himself as a sacrifice, a voice for those that don't have a voice to speak out about their inner issues. And so that's where I'm thinking, going back to the other question about being a leader, where it's like, yeah, he's trying to be a voice for the people and lead. But as you go through Soundtrack to My Life and the rest of the tracks, there's some criticism there for how he's treated, whether it's about his music or
the way he is the way kids see him at school He's kind of a loner, artsy kid. He tried to do sports, but he couldn't really fit in there. So he's just trying to find his place. And then the next track is Simple As.
And Simple As is also, I mean, I guess a spoiler alert, the whole album is not very happy. But my first note was not a happy song, but not a sad one either. So he's just, it's
a little melancholy.
It's very melancholy. So it's like kind of a happier note, but still sad of,
Right.
He kind of enjoys the simple things and, connecting, what do I put it? He enjoys simple things or connecting with listeners, tweeting dumb shit, dreaming about aspirations, standing up to haters, being positive. It's kind of, the track is kind of self-explanatory. It's just Simple As.
One of the lines I
Simple
really
As.
like is, I got to terminate the hate, spread the positive without it being whack and cheesy to the little kids. So I curse like a sailor and I smoke weed. I'm exactly who an older rapper's kids be. One thing I've noticed about him is he's very self-aware. He knows who he is. He knows he's not a hard, gangster rapper. He knows that he's kind of different and, he's a little more on the artsy side, the nerdy side, but he's still going to do things his way. And because of that, he's going to be perceived as cool or, interesting because, he's going to curse and smoke weed and be in that environment, but he's going to do it in a Kid Cudi way where the kids will want to be like that.
And then Common again cuts in at the end with kind of segueing you into the next part. Because this was kind of like as we were saying, like it's a happier song, but not. And so he's just kind of saying that, like, again, hinting at depression or anxiety that's kind of lurking around the corner. And he kind of ends the note with, he's dreaming in peace until a dark chapter unfolds. And then that kind of goes into the next track, Solo Dolo, which is your first nightmare song.
Right. Yeah, it leads you into the nightmare.
Leads you into the nightmare. So, what I put down for this one is like it puts you into this dark mood. And you would kind of, I guess, anticipate, you see it coming based on from the last track. And so Solo Dolo, I was reading some things that like it kind of stems from an old Tupac song of, I forget the lyrics, but, just like a big theme of this album is loneliness. So how he's just kind of dealing with experiencing rejection, loneliness, when he tries to do something right, it feels wrong.
And dealing with feelings of being an outcast, even with his own family.
Not the
and
duo,
friends.
Which is the lyrics, if I remember right. So dealing with an outcast, not the duo, referring to outcast. But.
Yeah. So, he's definitely dealing with his insecurities about himself and feeling like he's kind of floating around. He doesn't feel grounded. So he doesn't have, a firm grasp of where he's at. And one of the lines he says, "Look at me. I bet I'm the one you think to fail. Floating in my mind, no sail."
And that comes up later on in the album too. But now, he talked about his family and Soundtrack to My Life. But then in this song, he's also talking about how people around him think. So he mentions how people back home, they talk shit, they call him weird, they comment on his moodiness. But now he's kind of standing tall above them. So this is like later on, thinking in retrospect.
Right.
But but it still comes off that he's still troubled by the things that people used to say.
Right.
So, and then, going to the next track, this one kind of, you almost carry it with you throughout the rest of the album. So it's Heart of a Lion, the Kid Cudi anthem. And you almost think that even as you're hearing the nightmare tracks or other tracks that he's depicting like this really troubled lifestyle, that he almost refers back to this song of what, when someone asks him like, dude, you're going through all this stuff, but what kind of keeps you going? And it's his mom. He talks in this song about his mom kind of encourages him to keep going, motivates him, tells him that, no one can stop you.
Right.
And it's like a place that he turns to when he becomes consumed with negative thoughts of all the encouragement from his family.
He's almost talking himself up. This is his moment to give himself courage.
It's his anthem.
Yeah. It's his anthem for himself. It's not for anyone else. It's for him to, like, okay, I'm going to triumph over struggle. And it's his, the David versus Goliath story. So even though he knows he's maybe mentally unstable or he has some shortcomings, he's still going to be successful. He's still going to overcome all of it, even though he's aware of those things, which is great. I mean, it's a great mindset to have when you're feeling those things.
It's a great mindset to have. And as he carries that on, someday this will be his world to take and to grasp, which is the next track. So he mentions a little bit of how, when everything changed when his dad died and constantly reminding himself. And this is where some more of the encouragement comes from. So maybe it's his mom, but then also I'm dealing with all this shit, but at the same time, I have to be my own cheerleader. Yeah. So, he isn't lonely, but instead he's on the moon. So the moon, as we said earlier, in his dreams, when he goes to the moon, that's a safe space to go. And so in here, he starts talking a little bit more about like low self-esteem at this point and trying to, talk to girls and be cool with them and being rejected, no acceptance all around.
Yeah. It's the classic tale of, the revenge of the nerds, that kid, that loner, weird, nerdy kid in high school turns out to be a genius and artistic and thinks outside of the box. And even though they're alone with their own thoughts, that gives them the space to be creative and think for themselves and come up with new ideas.
And when he does, kind of like this metaphor, whatever you want to call it, like occasionally he ventures off of the moon. And when he ventures off of the moon, he tends to delve into drugs. And that's what kind of helps him cope when he can't be in that space. And, he talks about how trying to be, and he's had a multitude of jobs. They didn't really work out, but he's constantly grinding. And, despite the grind, it sounds like he did a really good job of keeping this mask on so that even people that cared for him didn't know the stuff that he was really going through.
Right. And he talks a lot about spending a lot of time alone and with himself. And, maybe his friends didn't really understand why he would do that, but that's just him coping with what he's going through. He needs that time alone to sort his thoughts or to feel what he's feeling and to make sense of it.
And as he keeps talking about it, you really see this night and day difference between the two realms. So day and night, which is another nightmare. So at nighttime, as we mentioned earlier, the album starts at night, which is when he's cool. He's relaxed. He's chilled out. But, from the last song, he's talking about the daytime when he has to leave the moon and he's in this rough spot. And now in this song is where he begins to start talking about, when he ventures off the moon, he's going to light up and smoke some weed to chill out and to kind of level him out. And still being rejected by women and stuff. But, but this is where it clearly defines the day and night difference of his life.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is a hugely popular song. You couldn't go anywhere without hearing this.
The song was dope.
It's a great song. It's a great beat. He's partly singing, partly rapping. It's got a great feel to it. Even though it's kind of a dark song, I remember this being played in the clubs, at parties. People weren't necessarily, diving into the darkness of it. They just enjoyed the sound of it.
That's the same thing.
The way he portrayed, like the way he sings on it.
I mentioned swimming pools earlier, and I just kind of made the connection, like, they're actually like similar in terms of style of day and night in swimming pools, because they're both not happy songs. One's talking about struggles with, doing, he mentions later on like the trials of the day, and then Kendrick's over here talking about, alcoholism and, trying not to give into peer pressure. So, but yeah, it's a trip. But, I like how this, I always am proud of like my segues, but this whole album is, it writes itself because the progression. It's all just one thing. So we're over here talking about day and night, and then someday that sky might fall, which is what he's anticipating, which is also the next track. So in here, he describes, these days where life is a rainstorm. He's constantly running on a narrow path. Life sucks. It's full of gray clouds. He can't sleep. But when he doesn't even really sleep. He just zones out. You kind of get a sense of insomnia at this point.
Right.
But you get this kind of feel that there's hope somewhere lurking as he does that. But the sky might fall, but he's still
right. He's still going to make it through. He's going to be all right, even if things go wrong. And this is the first song produced by Kanye on this album, which is because they've been working previously, but I think it's interesting that there's not more Kanye beats on here. But I think the producer that Kid Cudi works mostly on this album is one of his friends and who he came up with. And he stuck with that sound, which I think made sense. But now when I think about it, I'm like, okay, you're working with, you just signed with Kanye West, who's a legend. Why wouldn't you take it, like, push to use all of his production or whatever? But I think I think Cudi did the right thing in doing his own sound and not just, because I'm signed with Kanye, I'm going to use all of his beats. It's like he really wanted to create the Kid Cudi sound.
And he hit that sound. It's very unique.
Yeah.
And I'll give my thoughts in the end of what I think of his sound overall. But yeah, anyways, we mentioned, some type of new hope, and we enter Galactic Love Connection Part 1, which is the track. And here he meets a love interest. So in 2 previous tracks, he mentions how, in all the tracks, he mentions loneliness, not fitting in, rejection. But he also talks about, in the last 2 tracks, of not fitting in with women. And I don't know. I mean, I don't think, it doesn't necessarily specify, but when I hear this album, I think of him in high school. I think him.
That's definitely the feeling I get as well. That, maybe senior year of high school going into college.
Yeah, just because he mentions being in school, but it's not explicit, so you don't know if it's like he's just.
But a lot of the things that he's talking about on this album are very relatable to high school aged kids and college age kids. Around your late teens is when you're going through a lot of the stuff that he's talking about. And what makes it so relatable for a lot of teenagers in America.
Because they're all going through a lot of this stuff.
There's a lot of teenager angst going on. And Kid Cudi is, he's approaching all of those topics, and he's being open and vulnerable about himself, about them, so that it's easy for the listener to connect with him. He's very open about it, and it does make you think back to when you were a teenager, or if you are a teenager, what you're going through in the moment. You can listen to this album and feel not alone.
There's definitely a lot of connections there, and I think he overall really, the way that he defines loneliness and talks about it, I think is something that's very relatable to everybody. And so here in this track, being that he had been talking about being rejected from women, he finally has a love interest, and there's finally someone that has accepted him. Yeah. So in the first couple verses, he basically talks about how dreams are now reality, and he's venturing into this new type of free. And you just get the sense of transcending of, oh man, this life has just been super shitty, but now that I'm with you, I'm forgetting about all this stuff. It used to just be a dream.
Right.
And I like Common cutting in the end and talking about, he got high to escape this prison of reality. Because the song talks about he's with this girl, and then he's getting her on shrooms, and then they're just like checking things out and having a good time. But he's so caught. He did this to escape reality, the prison of reality. But now, with this transcendence, he's trapped in this peaceful place that becomes his sanctuary and his new home. And I thought that was, it's just this euphoric kind of feel from it of like, wow, this is awesome, and I don't really want to leave this place.
Yeah, one of the lines that really caught my attention is, see, if you can't do what you imagine, then what is imagination to you? Just a waste of space in your brain to take the place of hate or things all the same. And to me, he's basically saying, if you imagine things that you can't do or won't attempt, then what's the point of having an imagination? If you imagine something, you should be able to do it. And otherwise, you're wasting brain space.
We talked about that in not Fish Scale, but another one where the mind is not worth it. It's a precious thing to spill.
Right.
Basically, I forgot what line it was.
Who was that? Fuck.
Hey, we just recorded that. I don't remember. But
you know what this song really reminded me of was Snoop Dogg and Pharrell. I feel like this song could have fit on that album on Bush. It's that same euphoria, taking drugs to escape, and it's got that same bounce to it. So it almost makes me think, did Pharrell kind of take some of his production ideas from this song? Because it's very much like this.
That's possible.
I'm only thinking that because we just did Bush, so the song could have fit on that album.
Alive, which is a Nightmare track. What are your thoughts on this track, being that it's labeled as a nightmare, but then it isn't I'm going to say the traditional nightmare that we've been discussing, where it's usually this dark place?
Yeah, it's almost, obviously it's almost like he's like turning into a werewolf.
I thought the same thing.
And he's gaining power when it becomes night. It's almost like he's trying to overpower the nightmare. He's trying to become more scary than the nightmare.
The word that came to me was like invigorated. Like he was just invigorated by the
He's
moon.
Like, all right, if I'm going to be living in a nightmare, fuck it. I'm just going to be
going all
scarier
out.
than the nightmare.
Yeah, it's going to be, and it's cool because like in that last track when Common's talking about how like he gets trapped in this place, but coming from the last song, he's high on shrooms with this girl that he's been, with this history of being rejected by girls in general. It's interesting to kind of see this mutation of euphoria, but being in a really bad spot, and you kind of just roll with it and just say, fuck the world. So I don't know if it's interesting that he put that as a nightmare, but it's called Alive, but it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
But
interesting. I love the beat on this. I'm a fan of Rat-a-Tat. I'm not sure if you listen to them.
Yeah, I've heard some.
Yeah, I remember listening to a shit ton of Rat-a-Tat when I was in high school. This song especially brought me back, to being in high school and listening to those songs. But yeah, I think it's a dope song. It's a cool theme, and you're right. I don't necessarily know what the nightmare portion of it is, where something's going wrong. But I mean, I guess if you're turning into a werewolf and you're hunting down women, there's something wrong there.
I think you're rolling with the punches. Like, it's really shitty, but fuck yeah, I'm going to make the best of it and just go with it.
Exactly.
It's not the first place you would want to be. But hey, I'm high and I have a girl with me, so I'm fine.
Right.
Yeah. But I wonder if this is kind of that peak where things begin to get a little bit better. Because with Cudi's Own, he again talks about how people thought he wasn't destined to be anything. But once he gets in his zone, once he's found his zone, he feels good in it. Like he's accepted. And this kind of goes back to what you were talking about earlier of, he's not asking for pity. He's not throwing a pity party. It's acknowledging what his environment is and how people perceive him and being like, that's fine because I'm in my zone. I know how to handle and manage my emotions. I can self-regulate. Like I'm good to go. And you get a sense towards the end that he finds peace. And I like that he paints this picture of the devil in a dress that's looking to dance with them. But, it's like, hey, I got these guardians with me and like, I'll be fine through this. But that kind of relates to anxiety. If anxiety is one of my coworkers said, anxiety lurking in the corner, and that with the devil in a dress looking to dance, it's like, nah, man, I'm fine. Like,
Right.
the odds are against me, but I'm fine.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit more up tempo, and he's feeling good. He's in his own zone, and he's kind of got a grip on things a little bit. But yeah, it's a cool track. He's rapping a little bit more on this one. It's a little bit less singing than a lot of the other tracks. But
What did you think of the raps versus the singing?
I think when he just does rapping, I don't like it as much as when he's doing his own thing, where he's kind of singing along with each other. I don't see him as like a bar rapper where he's gonna spit like crazy
hell
bars.
no.
Yeah,
Nah.
he's more of like a vibe rapper.
Where's he? I guess he's still current. Like, he's still doing.
Oh yeah,
things,
he's still very current.
Do you think he's a good fit with 2020 hip hop right now?
Well, the last thing he did was Kid Cudi. Yeah, I mean, in his own way, I think he's always gonna fit in as long as he's being creative and doing his own thing. I think he'll always fit in because he's just gonna create his own lane.
I mean, I think because I'm going off the whole hype thing, which we talked about a couple episodes ago, and I think maybe where he might fall short with the new age stuff is that it's not necessarily upbeat, like it's vibes, but he also provides content, but in a very melodramatic fashion,
Right.
where a lot of this stuff we just did Debatey. And that stuff is all up tempo, as we kind of said, like, to put a kind of playlist together and keep it going. I don't know if Cudi kind of fits that mold, but definitely falls in with vibes.
Right.
That's my thoughts. And Make Her Say.
Poke her face.
Yeah. I liked Poker Face. I think my favorite Lady Gaga track is Alejandro.
I don't know what that is. I don't know anything about Lady Gaga.
Don't act like you never listen to the radio.
I've
in your
heard
life.
her songs on the radio, but I couldn't tell you the names of her songs.
Well, I can name like 3 songs: Poker Face, Alejandro, and I can't remember. I can't even third one. But I've heard of her though. I know you've heard of that Meat Dress.
This song was alright for me. I wasn't too stoked on it. First of all, it doesn't really fit into the album.
Does it?
I don't know. I think it's just like a fun shit talking track.
It is, but I can agree with you. I'm wondering if it does fit in because now that he's had a taste of a girl, and like, damn, like she's in this club, ass is fat, looking good. Like maybe this may be a new thing for him that he's been hearing about in music that now he can actually shed some light on. So I'm wondering if it kind of wasn't. But in its own way,
it was a funny track. I laughed at it. I think I think Common had the best verse. I think his was the funniest. But yeah, it's just not the greatest song. I'm also not a huge fan of Kanye rapping. So
of Kanye rapping,
yeah, I don't like Kanye rapping. I like his production
before, like the 3 albums, like his first 3 albums. You don't like him rapping?
No, I'm still not a fan.
Whoa.
I don't think he's the greatest rapper.
No one said he was the greatest rapper. I'm just asking why you don't like his rapping.
I don't like his flow. And I don't think he says anything that, crazy. I think it's just very simple rhyming to me.
Someone I was a while back watching a video, and there's a series on YouTube where like they have artists come on and guest lyrics, and I was watching the episode with Rhapsody, and she did a Kanye one, and she's like, his lyrics, they're super simple, but there's something about them where they hit really right. And so I forget the way that she said it, but she nailed it on the head though. Of his lyrics, they are simple, but they kind of get the point across.
Yeah, they definitely do. It's just not for me. I'm not saying he's bad or anything like that. It's just I never gravitated towards his rapping. I never really got into it.
You say you don't like it, so that must mean you think it's bad.
No, I don't think it's bad.
Then
I don't
you
think Kanye is bad.
Then you like it then. so
Or I'm indifferent.
Oh, okay. Sidestep. But yeah, I like that track. I mean, I have to say, if I'm gonna take some tracks from this album, I think "Make Her Say" would be one of them. If I had to pick three, I think "Make Her Say" would probably be my third pick.
Wow.
But that's that. Pursuit of Happiness, we move into another nightmare, right? And this is where, like, I'm gonna use the term again, like his traditional nightmare of like, this is not a good thing for me, and this sucks. So it's kind of on the depressing side. You know, he's talking about, he starts you off with like, dude, I'm driving drunk. I don't really care what's gonna happen, and if I die, I lived life to the fullest. I dodged many bullets, and I don't know. He kind of calls people out, like, what do you know about night terrors? And kind of calling people out in the sense of, like, he's worried about the trials of tomorrow. For some reason, it doesn't bother you as much.
Right.
But, like, it's something I have to deal with, but fuck you because you think you're... I don't know. I guess that's kind of how I perceive it.
Yeah, I really like this song. I like the features with MGMT and Ratatat doing the production. It's a very... You know, it's a very catchy song. It's easy to sing along with. And I like the themes of it, they're living in the moment. They're like, we know everything's not going to be gold and perfect, but for tonight we're going to party and live it up and just kind of let go of all of our inhibitions and just be ourselves and have fun. And they're aware that that's not what's going to lead you to permanent happiness.
It almost sounds like this pursuit of happiness. You almost think of this road and there's all these obstacles and obstructions and things that are, it's making a very rough path to find this happiness. And so that's kind of what I got out of that. Just like, man, my life has been so rough that I don't even care. If I don't make it to the end goal of happiness, I lived well, and that's cool.
Yeah, and when you're young, you're able to think like that. You have angst and you don't quite understand your place in the world and you don't know how you fit in. So you're okay with letting go of all that and just like letting go of I'm not supposed to drink, or I'm not supposed to do drugs. I'm supposed to do all these good things. It's letting go of all that and just being free. And, as you get older, you kind of can't live like that. You have an understanding that, you need to have some sort of structure. But yeah, it's a great song for young people when you're in those moments.
It sucks because you almost have to, teenage years it's a hard one because you really feel like this is it. You're social. Trying to fit in and be social is really hard, and it's not for everybody. And you're kind of like, man, this is the end. Like, I don't want to keep doing this. And, I've had to talk to kids about the kids that I work with that it's really not until you graduate high school that you really start living. Like, high school, it really feels like everything is it and the stakes are high. But it's really when you graduate that it all happens. But at the same time, when you graduate, you become an adult, that's where life becomes more serious. So then you kind of look back into high school and be like, man, like I actually had a lot of freedom then and like things were cool.
Right.
Take a lot of things for granted.
Yeah. And, I can look back at myself from high school and I definitely didn't take advantage of the quote unquote freedom of being able to let go and not worry about the consequences or the repercussions of partying or, doing things that, your parents don't want you to do and things like that. So it's, obviously I had, a few moments, but I never quite got all the way there of just letting go.
And that's what's up is like you have, as you said, like you have this freedom when you're a teenager. It doesn't feel like it, but you notice it as an adult because now you have all these responsibilities to go with it. It's like you have as much, if not more freedom than when you were younger. But now it's like, well, I kind of have to like make sure I get these bills paid and that I am coherent when I go to work tomorrow. So
you could let go of all that and just live your life. And I think a lot of people get caught up with that when they're older, through drug use or alcohol or, partying, whatever. They kind of don't grow out of it, and they don't quite get to the level of understanding that, if you live your life this way, it's not going to turn out how you want it to. You're going to run into a lot of hurdles.
And it sucks because there's no manual for that.
No.
There really isn't. You really have to just figure it out. I mean, I feel like, we're both 30, 31. You're 31, right? Yeah. And, I feel like at 30, I'm like, wow, like, I feel like I have a grasp on life. Like, I know what to expect. Because the 20s, you really feel like you know a whole lot. But then there's still so much to come. And I'm sure, and I'm not going to speak like I'm some wise old man or anything like that. I'm sure at 30, there's still a bunch of stuff to come. But now, having lived 30 years, I feel like I have a good grasp of like the random things that might hit me, minus a ruptured appendix. But for the most part, I don't feel like there's much right now that could surprise me that is out of my control.
Right.
I don't feel that way. But getting back, like, we got 2 tracks going. Matthew. Higher. Did you feel like this track fit the album?
Not necessarily. It's a weed song. About waking up, smoking weed, but I think it can fit because it's when you're smoking weed, it can kind of put you in a dreamlike state of your thoughts kind of go everywhere and you're floating around. So in that sense, it could fit. But I'm not mad. I'm fine with the song being there. I don't think it shouldn't be there.
I was asking because, going off of Make Her Say, where you were kind of like, yeah, it doesn't really fit in too well. And then Higher, where, he's talking about, for shows or whatever else, hanging out with friends, just basically keeping this bag of drugs, whether if it's cocaine or Patron or whatever else. Like, this is what he does to level himself out and to chill. And so I think I agree. Like, I think it fits, and then it doesn't, because the beginning of the whole album was very heavy on loneliness and rejection, and I'm by myself, and anxiety and depression and all this stuff. And as I mentioned earlier, like, you kind of hit this peak with Alive and Cudi Zone, where he's stuck in this zone. And now there's you're starting to see a little bit more confidence from him with the aid of drugs at this point. So we saw that with, tripping on shrooms. We see how he's getting high off weed to kind of chill himself out. Now that he's has more friends, I'm going to assume he's got them going on too. And so I'm pretty sure it was this track. Correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm mixing up with the next one. But, a friend hits him. I was like, dude, I'm at this party. Things are about to get lit. Like, let's go. And now he's starting to fit in he's bringing some of the stuff he uses to cope to fit in now. So it's almost like this easy transition for him.
Right.
And one of the things I saw from another one of his interviews is that he talked about how he wished he had applied himself a little bit more academically. I'm assuming he didn't do too hot in school, but it was really afterwards that he started getting into music and then things took off. And so there's a I don't have the line, but he talks about how, like, smoking weed in school and now he's an addict. And so what I got from that was, I smoked a lot of weed to kind of coast and get through, but since I wasn't there academically, and I was relying on weed so much, like, now I'm just addicted to stuff just to get me through. Like, I need it to get me through this. Because he mentions before, like, when he's in a safe space, if he comes out of the moon, it's to do drugs. And so that's what I kind of got from that, of like this reliance to be higher.
Yeah. And I think he says some very impactful lines. He says, "We outside because my mama in the house. Puff, puff, pass with your bitch ass. Back in high school, smoked weed when I cut class, and now I'm an addict. Tragic."
That's the line.
Yeah, so he's thinking, in high school it's a little more innocent. You're like, oh yeah, we're just cutting class and smoking weed. We don't care about school. But then he gets older and he keeps those habits. Maybe he goes stronger into them, and now he's looking back like, oh crap, I'm actually an addict now. What happened? So it's just him being open with himself, and but he does it in a way where he's not angry at himself. He's not putting himself down. He's just having a realization. Mm-hmm. It's almost like he doesn't care that he's an addict. He's just like, oh, it's tragic.
By the way, I'm an addict. Yeah, he actually, I was reading the last couple of years, he checked himself into rehab because he developed a cocaine addiction. Mm-hmm. And, when I was watching I watched an interview with him in 2014, and he was talking about his first album, which is what we're doing. And he just kind of had, if you look at his face, like you can just see like this kind of life, this energy in him. And like, he's just super happy. And then the next one I saw, which I think was either 2017 or 2018, he did a TED Talk, which is cool. And he did an interview with Arsenio Hall. And then he also did one with Jada Pinkett Smith. And in those, it just changed. And this is where this song kind of touches on that, because you could kind of, and maybe it helps knowing about his history of like falling into drug addiction and being depressed and anxiety. Mm-hmm. And he was also suicidal. And you can kind of just see it in his face over, from 2014 to 2017 or whenever I saw it. It just, kind of just, what are those things called when you have bags under your eyes? Mm. And just that kind of energy kind of left. And he seemed really sad and hurt.
Yeah. And I think he's mentioned this, that I think a lot of that had to do with him being famous mm-hmm. and being in the limelight.
And living up to expectations.
Yeah, and I think that is a dangerous and deadly combination of drugs, alcohol, dealing with being famous.
And it just being all around you.
And his mental condition. It's not a good combo. And that could be a huge factor of him having to go into rehab, is just him being famous. Would he have gotten that far if he had never became famous? We don't know, but you can make assumptions and be like, yeah, you're not under the microscope. If you're just a normal person, for him, he can't even leave the house without being bothered. Mm-hmm. So how do you deal with life under like that?
You get high, I guess.
Yeah, and what's crazy is I just watched the Amy Winehouse documentary.
I haven't seen that yet.
You should watch it. I mean, it's literally this. Like, she just became an addict and just went down a dark road after she got famous, after her first album, and she just couldn't get out of it. And through the documentary, you find out like she didn't really have a support system, to help her, but she just went down that dark path and she couldn't get out of it because she was in the spotlight so much. She had paparazzi following her around everywhere. Mm-hmm. And it just kind of pushes you when you're always being seen.
Quick shout out to Amy Winehouse real quick. If you're like me in the 2000s when she was coming out and you heard her song Rehab and then you hear that she dies of a drug overdose, you're like, oh, that's ironic and that's really shitty. And you haven't really listened to her music. Be like me in later 2000s where you actually listen to Back to Black. That's a great album.
Fantastic.
That's an amazing
All her music
album.
is amazing.
I just felt like her legacy, if you don't know it, is very stained by what happened to her. And I mean, if you set that aside and listen to her music, she's amazing.
And relating it to Kid Cudi, I hope, it seems like Kid Cudi's doing better, but I hope what happened to Amy Winehouse and so many other celebrities and artists doesn't happen to him. Hopefully he can get the help and get out of it so that he can be in a good place with himself and not have to turn to drugs or alcohol.
I agree. And if Up in a Way is any semblance of that, mm-hmm. I think he will be in a good spot. And, he talks about, again, just being in his own place, and, just whatever he needs to do to cope, maintaining that good place and just kind of floating above it all. Fuck the haters.
This is such a, bright moment in the album. It's like coming out of the darkness and into the open blue sky. Mm-hmm. That's how I imagine it. He says he feels like he's Peter Pan. It's almost like he flies out of the storm and then all of a sudden he breaks through the clouds and it's clear blue skies and brightness and the sun's out and he's finally feeling, in a good place. And
Well, don't forget, what do you need? What do you need in Peter Pan? What do you need in order to fly?
you need fairy dust.
And you need the fairy dust. That's not enough. What else do you need to do?
I don't remember.
You need happy thoughts.
Happy thoughts.
You need happy thoughts, man. You have to think happy thoughts in order to fly. You can't just sprinkle Wendy and all the boys with this dust and then nothing happens. You have to have
Right.
happy thoughts. So, I mean, I think when he brings that up, that's a good point of, if we want to use that analogy, it's just like things can be cool, but I really, whether if it's his anthem or other parts of the album, like just encouraging himself to kind of just stick with it and go through it. And as he's mentioned in other tracks, like, kind of there's people that are there to bring him down, but he's kind of he's standing tall and looking down at them now, like I made it and I'm cool.
Right.
I'm still dealing with my stuff and I'm doing the best that I can, but
You
fuck the
can
haters.
see, the light at the end of the tunnel.
So, and then that's kind of just, he ends the album on that note of it's still acknowledging that there's a problem, but floating above it to stay in a good space. And
Yeah, I think it's a great way to end the album. And Common does come in again at the end, and he says it's not over. So maybe there is some darkness ahead, but for now, we're gonna relish the moment of breaking free from the darkness.
because that makes sense. Like, I mean, that's just ongoing. It's never, the fight's never over. That's
Right,
just
especially if you're not an addict. The fight is never over, literally. You're always an addict, so it's not like after rehab you can, only drink beer. It's like, no, you're done with everything. Like you're gonna have to fight for the rest of your life, basically.
So, what are your thoughts on the album?
This is my first time listening to it all the way through, and I really enjoyed it. It was a fun listen. It was interesting. It kept my attention through every track. I never felt bored or thinking to myself, why is this song here? They're all great songs. What I can definitely see is Kid Cudi is a great song maker. He's not the best rapper. He's not the best singer, but he can make songs. And he's very genuine with his writing, so it's easy to connect with him. And when you do that, you're gonna reach a lot of people if you're easily connectable. So that's what I liked most about this album is all the things that he talks about with himself. They're relatable no matter where you are in life. If you have to look back or if you're experiencing it yourself right now, you can relate to this album.
Does this album age well?
I think so. Maybe some of the production is a little outdated, but that's to be expected, from 2009.
Does this content age?
No,
No?
I don't think the content ages because a kid in high school could listen to this now and relate to it.
No. That's what I mean. Like, if it ages well, like its content, then that.
Yeah,
it
it aged really well.
Oh, I thought you said no.
No, I said yeah.
Oh, I didn't hear that. My thoughts, Matthew. I think this is, every album that we do, we both do, but I'm talking about myself. I definitely try to take a very objective approach, regardless of who I'm listening to. And with that said, like, I have to say, I thought this album was good in the sense of what the content is delivering. I think it's connecting. It'd be a good argument to say what audience this targets. And just from the themes and who I feel would relate most to it would be people mostly in high school, probably like a junior or a senior, and maybe even younger than that, and going forward, and people that have had obstacles and troubles in their life. I can't think of a lot of artists off the top of my head that, you have Pharoah Monch and you have Joyner Lucas who talk about ADHD. And then you have Ghostface who references paranoia. And I'm just saying those because of the most recent albums that we've done where I can immediately think of a diagnosis. But, I think it's important these are important topics to touch on. And there isn't a lot of music out there that people can listen to. Like, because anxiety and depression are real and they're out there. And how much music can you say is out there that you can hear that and be like, I feel that.
Especially throughout the whole album.
Throughout the whole album.
Yeah.
And so I really like that aspect, that it gives that population something to connect to, of like, hey, I may be rich and famous, but my shit sucked. And not only did my shit suck, just like Jay-Z's or any other artist, but like I also dealt with these things. I felt outcasted. I didn't feel like I was a part. And there are parts of my life where like I felt, I wouldn't say lonely to the degree where he did, but definitely feel like an outsider and an outcast. Yeah. So those are the stuff I thought was really cool.
And no matter who you are, you've dealt with loneliness at some point in your life, even if for a brief moment. You've been there. We've all been there. And that's just part of the human experience, which makes this a great album to listen to. Maybe it's not gonna be an album that you always want to listen to, but it is, when you are feeling like you're in that dark spot, this is a good album.
And it's very it's very motivating and encouraging because, like you mentioned earlier, he does a really good job of letting you know how he's feeling, but then also saying like, I don't want a pity party. I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm not looking for empathy. I'm just telling you, like, I may look good on the outside, but I'm really dealing with all these things on the inside. But also, like, these are the things I'm doing to help me cope with it. Whether if I'm just trying to be my own cheerleader, or I'm remembering things my mom said, or, mentioning people in his corner, or maybe even turning to drugs. Like, he's letting you know what he's doing to cope with it, to not give into the devil in the dress trying to get a dance with them. He's doing action steps and doing things to stay good.
Right.
However, the only really big critique I have about Kid Cudi is, I've mentioned it a few times in other pods, but it's his voice. I can't. It's too monotone. There's that energy is just not really there for me to keep me engaged in his tracks.
Gotcha.
And sometimes like choruses can be really long, to where he's just this monotone chorus. Yeah. But at the same time, it fits the album. It's a dark album. It's not supposed to be uplifting.
He does have a melancholy tone to his voice. His projection is not too energetic. It's not too drab. It's just kind of like right in the middle where it could go either way.
And it stays there. You just don't get a lot of inflection here and there. Like Day and Night is probably his most, I don't know. It just has the most diversity and range with fluctuations. There's just a lot of diversity there. But I want to say like a good 80% of the tracks are just kind of like monotone. And I don't know if I really want to listen to the whole thing. So that's my only critique. Yeah. Other than that, like I like the audience that he's reaching out to because they need some love. Yeah. Those are my rap thoughts.
It's a dope album. Definitely listen to it if you haven't, like us. Have you listened to the whole album before?
I've heard parts, but I've never listened to the whole thing.
So we were in the same boat. Obviously, I've heard all the singles, the songs that were popular. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. It does kind of make me want to listen to part 2, the next Man on the Moon album that came out the next year after this one came out, which seems pretty quick to put out an album. But, I do kind of want to see where he went with it. And I know from what I've read online and, people weren't a huge fan of some of his other projects. They kind of felt he went downhill.
I don't think any other track topped Day and Night.
No, that's been his largest song so far. But no, he's definitely an influential artist. He's impacted the music industry in a big way.
This album went double platinum, I believe.
Yeah,
which is cool.
Yeah, no, it's a dope album. I'm glad this one came up out of the hat.
You can thank Amanda and John. So.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in to the Rap Thought podcast. thank you guys for subscribing on Apple and following us on Spotify and following us on all of our social media platforms.
Thank you for joining us. Those are our wrap thoughts, and we'll see you next week.
Peace.